I'm Madelyn Blair, your host of Unlocked. On today's show, we'll be talking about leadership with James Shulgold. I think it's going to be fun because you see, this is a topic I have some opinions on. So stay tuned. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about activating the resilient leader in you. Today, we're going to have a conversation with James Shulgold on leadership, or as the title may be, program management versus project management. Who knows? Before we get into our conversation, I have to put my cards on the table. When I hear people talk about management and leadership as if they are two different things, I get a bit miffed. To me, those two words sit on a continuum. You really cannot separate them as two different activities. The tasks and the skills that you apply in one versus the other is simply modified depending on what the target of the action is. And don't be confused by the word target. I don't mean that in the pejorative, negative, power-hungry way. What I mean is you take a decision as a leader or as a manager, and that decision may affect a budget, it may affect a resource, it may affect time, and of course, ultimately, it always affects people. Then there are those people who say that you can learn to become a manager, but leaders are born. Hogwash. I grew up on a farm, and I know what that is. There are indeed a range of skills, attitudes, talents, capabilities that are called for in any leadership or management activity. Applying them has to do with scope. A manager watches timesheets to assure that they are meeting goals. A leader watches timesheets, but those timesheets have to do with product delivery or revenue targets. It's just scope. A leader defines the vision for the company. Is the company focusing on a particular market niche where specialization is important, or is the company focused on global distribution? Very different visions, but both are vision. The manager defines the vision for the team. Are they going to be working competitively with each other? Or are they going to be working in a collaborative way? Both are legitimate, but they're different visions. And they are visions. Where did I learn all this? For more than 50 years in management and leadership positions, degrees in management and organizational psychology, and my own research. And even though I feel very clear about how I see leadership and management, I love hearing the experiences of someone else who has lived at these jobs, because their insight always adds to mine and hopefully to yours. And with that rather opinionated introduction, I am delighted to introduce my guest, James Shulgold, especially because the bio he sent me was so refreshing. Immediately, I knew I was going to learn a great deal from him, because he says that he is a husband, a father of two, who is a pickleball professional instructor. He's played competitive racquetball for over 35 years and was state and nationally ranked with several state titles won along the way. He was a soccer coach for 15 years and ran his own club for 5. He is an avid fisherman and kayaker, and he loves his time and walks with Bella, his yellow lab. Well, I've got to bring him on screen so you can get to know him, because really and truly, he is a working professional. He's been managing in some form or fashion for 30 years. He's managed teams of 5 to more than 100. And he's been a project manager, an operations director, a product director, and today is a program director. He has a clear philosophy about how to manage at any level, and I'm going to let him tell you as we talk about this thing called program management and leadership. James, welcome to Unlocked.
Well, thank you, Madeline. Really happy to be here today. Very excited to spend the next hour or so with you and really collaborating and talking about leadership and management and everything in between.
Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay. Now, I love how you have brought leadership from many, many areas in your life. I love the fact that you said you're a coach and that you've had teams. I mean, all this sort of thing really adds what I call texture to
Yeah,
leadership. Um,
absolutely.
and it's derived from multiple experiences. So discuss how coaching and teaching and learning from others and transforming the way some people develop into leaders.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, it's great when you can recognize that experiences within your life and along your trajectory of work all kind of culminate into who you are as a leader, as a manager, as a person. And, I'd like to always walk back all the way, when kids are, coming out of, middle school, high school, and they're playing team sports. And people say, there's a life lesson, just in sports in general. And it's so true because you have to understand, 30, 40 years later, when you're in the management or in, working context, you have to understand what it means to be a team player, what it means to have a leader that you aspire to be, someone that you follow. And at times you have to be that leader on a team where people will gravitate towards you and look for you to score the winning goal or the winning basket or whatever that might be in the sporting context. So early on in my childhood, I always gravitated to team sports. And that was where I really got my first inclination of what it means to be part of a team and what it means to be a high performing team, which means a team that wins. And let's face it, we all like to be on a winning team.
Yeah.
Uh, and once you get a taste of what it means to be on a winning team, uh, winning and kind of breeds, success breeds success kind of attitude. So once you get a taste of it, you want more of it. So I always like to talk about, how I played, soccer and baseball and basketball, and eventually gravitated to racquetball. And I played these sports for many, many years before even entering the workspace. So that was my first, I would say, introduction. Madeline, for you, growing up, was sports a part of your life at all?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
We, as a family, we never talked about sports. We never watched football on television. Nothing like that. You see, I grew up on a farm. Well,
Okay, yeah,
you are busy on a farm. You don't need sports to get your exercise. Let me tell
that's a
you.
very, very valid point. Very valid point.
But I was going to interrupt you almost and say, but what about this perspective? Because we never did that, and I never really worked on a sports team. But gosh, I've worked with many, many teams and love it. And
Right.
I'm kind of, in a way, almost envious that you have that experience. What was it, as it, if being on a team, what was it that really made it satisfying to you?
So I would say for me, the biggest satisfaction was when I was a contributor to the team that led or helped the team lead to success, whether it was winning the game, a championship, just doing well against a competing team that was much better than us, and we, and hold our own. I can remember as far back as being in Little League, and having a really rough start, having the first, I don't know, it was 10, 12 games, never even hitting a ball. Every time I got up to plate, I would strike out, and it was pretty demoralizing. And about midway through the season, we went up against the number one team, and I had two men on base, and we were late in the game. And I got up to plate, and I could already hear the people behind me, the parents going, "Oh boy, yeah, this one's an easy one." The kids were chanting on the mound and in the field that were playing against us, and just basically saying this was going to be an easy out. It probably would have been. We got maybe a lucky swing, but that lucky swing turned into a double, brought in two runs, and we wound up winning that game by a run. That was a turnaround point for me because at that point, from midseason for the rest of the season, I wasn't going strike. I wasn't striking out every time at bat. I was hitting the ball.
Isn't that
I had
interesting?
a newfound confidence. Yeah, and I was a contributor to the team. End of the season, I become the most improved player on the team, and an award that again I really kind of idolized because I was very young, and I was seen as a member of the team that was contributed in a positive manner. So that was my earliest experience that I can recall.
That is a great story. And it really helps me. I'm sitting here going, I can understand that. I can understand being a part of a group where you do something that is, I'll say, unique or critical at a moment. I mean, I can think now of project teams that I've worked on where maybe I came up with a particular answer or an idea of how to approach something and the team took it on and it worked. So I can
Right.
understand that. But how
Yeah.
great that you started so early in your life to build confidence that way.
Well, thank you. And I think there's everyone can draw. And I start with the childhood because I think that that's the formative years that really start our development
Yeah.
process. Like you, I have a background in human resource development and organizational development. So understanding, what makes people tick is something that I really find very intriguing.
Yeah.
So being on a farm, I've got to imagine that you didn't do everything by yourself. There probably were, cows to be milked and eggs to be taken in and crops to be, sowed. Um, but I guess there's probably a team of people that worked on that farm, and you had to really coordinate your efforts. And if one person didn't pull up their part, maybe
Actually,
something didn't get done, right?
I really appreciate this because I'm sitting here thinking to myself, yes, I remember that when my sister and I had to weed the corn because we did principally it was an egg farm. We produced eggs, but we also produced vegetables. And and I can tell you that to like a 9-year old to face a 2 acres of corn, it's a big
Daunting
deal.
task.
And I was always fast. And I would be going, and my sister was very, very methodical.
Right.
So, so I could see your point.
Yeah. And you kind of need both, right? Like, especially in that circumstance, right?
Yeah,
You need the methodical where it's good quality, and you also
exactly.
need the timeliness, right? And the speed.
Exactly, exactly. In fact, what that calls to mind is this aspect of leadership, and it's one of the reasons that I really am opinionated about it because I've really thought about it and I really studied it. Is that there's so much that gets packed into this single
Yes.
word. I mean, it's a culmination of multiple disciplines. Now, you work both at the project level and program level, corporate level.
Correct.
How do you see those shifts?
So it's definitely you have to manage and you have to lead where you're at, right? And what I mean by that, um, if you're in a very large structured company, and I'll take my one of the first companies I worked for like 10 years, Monumental Life, an insurance company where I was inside operations. Um, very structured, very by the book. Management was very important, right? And management, of course, is the tasks piece of it, making sure, as you mentioned, time cards are filled out and submitted on time. Processes are being followed. Quality assurance is being followed. Um, Individuals are commended and reprimanded based on the work output. To me, that's management tasks. And so when you're in an environment that is very structured and very large, and you are siloed in just a certain area of the company, I think you find that you develop your management skills faster than you will build up your leadership skills. Hence, if I move a little farther past the point, when I worked over at Arbitron, a radio ratings company. Fantastic company. Um, there, I had a team of what I call the blue collar workers. We were in a true operational shop where we put money into envelopes and into boxes, and we mailed it out for response rates. And people on this podcast might remember getting something in the mail to respond to get their radio station counted. So that was my operation. We had more money that we worked with than most banks. So we were locked down like Fort Knox, very operationally minded. However, because it was a unique situation and it wasn't very, the processes were templated, but they needed leadership in order to migrate from how they did things for 20 years to a new way of doing things, a new thought process. That leadership only happens when people have somebody to follow and they believe in, that they see a vision, they see something that's going to be better for them, better for the company. So there I had an opportunity to develop more of my leadership type of skills, which was talking to people, getting them on board, making them feel good about what they've done, having them contribute to the ideology of the vision of how to migrate from point A to point B. And we did that. We were able to go from a quality standpoint of less than 80% of our boxes and envelopes that were going out the door to over 99.6% quality rating, while decreasing costs by over 20%. Now, 20% on this operation was a lot of money,
Yeah.
a lot of money. And again, it wasn't because I was so wonderful and because I was a great manager. It was because I was able to leverage some of my leadership skills in which I was able to bring in others to collaborate. And they came up with the ideas. And then together we're able to implement. So to me, that's a big difference between the leadership and the management aspects, at least early on in my career.
Yeah. Well, you're pushing back at my original premise that it's just they're all the same, but in a way you've reinforced it. It is a question of scope. So when you're in the leadership role, you simply see you have a different vision of or scope of what you're looking at. Whereas at the management level, it is a more narrow activity. Hmm.
Right.
Okay, I want to diverge a little bit
Sure.
because one of the things I have found in my experience, whether I'm called the leader or the team manager, I don't care, is how this aspect of motivating people. Talk about your experiences around. I mean, you talked about a blue collar situation. How did you motivate them that they were able to do things better or do things at all?
Right. Which is, to me, the one of my bigger success stories. And the reason why I say that is I am in healthcare data analytics or some sort of IT analytics and have been for most of my career.
Mm.
At this point in my juncture, this was the first time working as I called blue collar, which were what I call the salt of the earth. These, and they were all women. They were most incredibly hardworking, on their feet, 8 to 14 hour days, and would do it day in and day out and wouldn't miss a beat. And when I say, one of the hardest workers I've ever seen, to this day, I don't think I've seen anything quite like it. Appreciating what they do, who they are, not belittling because they might not have a GED, right? Not belittling that they haven't moved past the station of being a, inserter of money into an envelope or a box fitter.
Yeah.
Understanding that their purpose is so absolute critical to the operation that without them, you cannot run this operation. To me, was the aha moment. When I first came in, I looked at it and I said, this is what I'm going to run. And for a moment, I really felt like maybe I'm better than this. And it
Mm.
took me only about a week to realize that I was not above it, that I'm nowhere close to above it, that I am in it. And if I put myself into them and vested interest into them, I would get the most out of the entire team. And that's what happened. So again, did I do some things right? Yes. But it's the mindset. I think anybody with the right mindset would have got that job done to that level, quite
I,
frankly.
I loved your phrase. You realized you were in it. You
Yeah,
were, so often I have met and worked with managers who really have not understood that they are in it. They feel they are, as you called it, above it. And
right,
it's so hard for them to make things happen. And if you are in it, as you said, it does make a remarkable difference. I mean, even when I was teaching students, I would never put myself on a on a pedestal. It just didn't make sense to me. They were they were being we were training them to be our equals. Well, we can't treat them like they're less just because they have less knowledge. That's
right.
absurd. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially with all the interviews that you've done, CEOs and owners of companies, uh,
Mhm.
that there probably is, as you, I call grow and station, right? As you mature and move up the ladder and you make more money and you have the bigger car and the bigger house, there's this mentality that kind of grows that is more egotistical, right? And I think their viewpoint in general, right? And I'm, of course, not saying all, in general, become different. Has that been your experience?
Yeah. It comes from the fact that we have this country, we really um, honor individual excellence,
Mhm.
very independent kind of thing. And we tend to think that, well, if I made it to here, then I must be better
Yeah,
because that's what we talked about. And I was raised in a very different family. I mean, the fact that you were on this earth meant that you were worthy of being here.
right.
Just anybody, nobody else is worthier than you, and you're not worthier than anybody. So it's a very different kind of upbringing, and actually, I struggled with that when I was first in management because
Yeah,
I don't understand, and but eventually I was able to figure it out. Not
yeah.
that, yeah.
I still, one of my mentors, going back to my early involvement in management. I was 21 years old, was named team leader at Monumental Life of a small team of, I think it was 7 people. Everyone on that team had me by probably 20 or 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I was definitely the quote unquote baby of the group. My senior management, the senior vice president, Gary, still, one of my favorite managers to this day. He said to me, this is your first entry into management, but I'm going to let you know a little secret. If you treat everybody with respect, if
Yes.
you act as a team member,
Yeah.
you put your pant leg on one leg at a time like everybody else, and you remember that through your entire career,
Mm-hmm.
you'll be just fine. And he was talking about our CFO and our CEO at the time. He says, "Don't be arrogant like these jerks,"
Mm-hmm.
because they were. They were quite arrogant. And I'll tell you a funny story that I think the listeners will love. So here I am, 21-year-old, leading a group um, called Military Services Team. We were a cross-functional team doing underwriting and customer service and the front end processing. Everything was culminated, and it was a first team dynamic for Monumental Life, where they brought all these disciplines and put them all into one team. And I'm leading this one team, and we're doing gangbusters well on work. I go to a happy hour in which the executive team is at. So I am right now at that age where I've been dating my girlfriend for some time, and I've proposed, and we're going to get married. So I go and tell my boss, Gary, hey, I'm getting married and honeymoon is, X day away. And he says, gig is in, have fun, enjoy. So I go to this happy hour and the 3 executives are there having a drink and they said, James, come on over here, come talk to us. I said, sure. So I go over and I'm like, how are you, Ralph? How are you, Henry? And they're like, good, good. They're like, so how are things going? I said, things are going wonderful. We are doing gangbusters worth of work. Team is doing fabulous. In fact, we can barely keep our heads above water. There's so much work coming in. They said, it's fantastic. I said, yep. And I said, they said, how are things in your personal life? I said, things are going wonderful. In fact, I'm getting married next month, going on a 2-week honeymoon, going on a cruise. The CFO, Ralph, says to me, oh, hold up. What do you mean you're going on honeymoon? And I said, yeah. He goes, 2 weeks. I said, I am. He turns and he says to the CEO of the company, who's standing right there, and he says, Henry, he goes, I don't know if we can afford to have him gone for 2 weeks when we're doing such great work, right? He's like, goes, we're not saying not to get married. We're just saying postpone your honeymoon. Why don't you go ahead and we'll take care of it? I said, well, I've already paid for, guys. I said, this is, it's a done deal. They, oh, don't worry about it. We'll take care of the cost. We need you. So I go back after the happy hour. Next morning, I go into work, and my head's hanging low because I don't know what I'm going to do here. I just got this new position, and I'm being told not to go on a honeymoon. I walk into my boss's office, and he says, "You all right, James?" I said, "Here's what happened." And here's where leadership comes into play. Gary says to me, James, and I won't use the actual word what he says, but he starts with an F, and he says, F them. That is unbecoming of any leadership. No one is that critical that they can't live without you for 2 weeks. I don't care who you are. You're going on your honeymoon. You're not telling anybody where you're going. You're not giving any phone numbers. You're not giving any emails. And you're going to go and enjoy yourself. And when you get back, you're going to have a job. And don't you worry, because I'm protecting you. So I give that example because that was the first time that somebody took such a stance for me in a leadership position that I
Yes.
said, that's who I want to be. I want to be that guy. So, and that was, some 35 years ago. And I still remember that as like it was yesterday.
So you've been celebrating a 35th anniversary then.
Yeah, it's been about that long now. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
All these things are important. Well, as you were talking, I was thinking we really do have expectations about our leaders. Um, for example, I really always thought that leaders should know what was going on. They should know the business. And of course, oftentimes they don't know the business.
Right.
They're placed there because it's part of a development process for them. Do a little management over here and then we'll take you back, kind of thing at another level. What's your experience with people's expectations?
So I find that expectations are different depending on the environment. And I say that because, to your point, I work in mostly government contracting at this point and have been for the last um, 15 years. And so I'm a contractor that works for federal governments, and we implement, large scale systems and implementations, data analysis, and different technology stacks. Working alongside of my feds that are in their roles, there's this ideology that they don't work. I'm going to tell you right now that's not true. At least the group that I work with, which is CMS, they work their tails off. Day in, day out, they are the most dedicated individuals for the people of the United States. Hands down. Haven't met one yet that I'd said, yeah, they need to get rid of that person. That's a loafer. Again, just my experience. Now, they have what's called detail, where people will come in and spend either 3 or 6 months learning a new role. Their level of expectations are probably not the same as the folks that are in those jobs permanently and doing the jobs. So the expectations are that they're going to come in and learn, but they're not going to make any changes. They're not really stirring that soup. And because they know they're going to leave, and they also don't want to make big waves when they come in, because they might not find their way back home if they do, right? So again, situational. But I do find in the main, there is such a strong need for employees to have a good manager and a good leader. And I know it goes a little against your grain of, what's the difference between a manager and a leader. And I do see that there's definitely a composite difference between the two. They need to live together. You cannot just be a manager and you cannot just be a leader. You
Right.
will fail at both.
Right.
But there is different aspects of the job that force you to be more one of the other.
Mm-hmm.
Individuals on a team that are early on in trying to come together, the forming, norming, storming, performing, when they're first forming, they need that structure. They need to know
Yes.
what it is that they got to do. What are the tasks that they're assigned to? So when they are going through and they're battling it out, trying to figure out who's got position and who's the strength of the team, and they're going through that storming phase, before they can get to the norming, that's where your leadership starts kicking in and you start showing the vision that everybody's got to swim this way. If everybody's swimming every different direction, we're not getting there, folks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all of a sudden, the management aspect of the structure starts turning into more of the vision and the direction to help navigate the team to where the endpoint needs to be
Mm-hmm.
and get through that passageway of the storming phase faster. Because the faster you can get through storming, you get to performing. And
Let,
then you recycle it again as people come in and
right.
go.
Let's talk a little bit about those lovely words. I mean, you and I know what they mean because we've worked with them for a long time, but maybe my audience
Sure.
don't all understand. So why don't you begin with the first one?
So forming, storming, norming, performing, forming, norming, storming, and performing are the cycles that teams will normally go through from it's an evolutionary
Mm-hmm.
cycle. And the cycle starts when you grab a bunch of people together, and we'll take a sports team, for example. So we're going to go back to my soccer days, right? So running a club, very managerial. The leadership comes when you're a coach on the field and you're telling them what our objectives are and what we're going to do, right? Um, when you have a team and you pick your team, from your at the beginning of the season, and you have a tryout and you pick your team, you put them together, and that's the first stage. You form the team. And I guess what happens at the forming of the team? Everybody's like, "Hi, how are you? My name is James. This is Madelyn. We're going to be best buddies because we're on the same team." It's wonderful, right? Everybody's
For
happy.
about 5 minutes.
Yeah, for about 5 minutes, and they're very, for the most part, they're they hold back, right? They're not going to give. They're not showing all their cards, right? They're not going to show their best moves. They're not going to show you the best tricks on the field yet. They want to feel out what is this team all about. But most of the time, everybody's very pleasant. And then they start getting into what this norming phase. And the norming is where they start working and they start doing things together and they're figuring things out. And some things are working and some things might not be working, but they're still feeling each other out and still very cordial to one another and trying to be supportive.
Mm-hmm.
So one player might not be as fast, and another player might say, "It's all right, Johnny. You know, I got your back. Even though you can't get there,
Yeah.
I'll cover you, right? I'll cover your backside. So don't you worry." And then game time hits, and we're playing, and the other team is knocking the brakes off of them. Well, all of a sudden, that norming turns into a little bit of conflict,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Johnny not getting to the ball is not okay anymore because they're scoring the goals on us, and that's not okay. And I'm going to tell little Johnny that I'm not okay with that. And this is a teammate saying this, not the leader yet.
Yeah.
So now you got all these things happening. The goalie drops the ball, and the goalie has butter hands, and this person doesn't show up for practice, and this person doesn't, is late to work, right? And late to practice is the same as being late to work. So all this storming is going on where they are really starting to unleash on each other because they're comfortable with each other and they're able to now communicate the things that are working well, but mostly the things are not going well. At that point, it's when you want to get that team through that process and get them to a better place, which is where they're all working together. They're one team scoring goals and winning that game. And you can only do that if you can navigate them and you navigate them through leadership. The management aspect is telling them what their positions are, what they have to execute, what is the game plan, showing them on the board. You go from here to here. When you pass the ball, you pass it with the inside foot to here. When you want to shoot, this is where you shoot. But leadership is, here's how we're going to do it as a unit. This is the vision. This is how we're going to attack from the back and how we're going to push the ball up to the wings, and we're going to cross and make our goals because we have a plan on how we're going to defeat the other team. We have done the due diligence. We've done the research on how to approach this. And that's how you get the team to go from that storming to performing. And that's the same thing as you would use quintessentially with a work team.
I want to go back though. How
Okay.
how does the okay, let me say that differently. You mentioned that they see that there is the person they thought was an A performer is a B plus performer, and they see a particular gap, but they know they can fill in for that. They can back it up. How does that get reflected later on when the leader comes in with the vision of this is how we're going to do it? Do those kinds of accommodations, I'll call them, do they just simply naturally come into play?
I would say that they naturally come into play. So identifying, and as you're probably well aware of the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that you kind of perform on any team organization, um, you need to assess what you have and where you have some strengths. So little Johnny might not be very fast, but little Johnny might have an incredible soccer IQ.
Yeah.
He might be one of the best ball handlers. He could be, like as in basketball, the point guard, right? He's the playmaker. He might not be the one that's going up and slamming the ball in the net,
Yeah.
but he has a purpose, and you have to identify where is the strength that lies within little Johnny, knowing that his weakness has to be counteracted with somebody else's strength, right?
Mm.
So Jesus was my fastest player on my team for years. Jesus would have to back up little Johnny because if he doesn't, we're going to get goals scored upon us. So
Okay.
again, leveraging what you know about your staff, about
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
people, about the kids on your team is such a critical component. And I think that's what gets lost when talking about management leadership and doing assessments and doing, oh, we can do find out a personality test. Yeah, you can. But sometimes just sitting down and talking
Yeah.
like this, getting to know somebody, asking questions,
Yeah.
right? So for you, you had, you said you come from from a farm and you did have team dynamics and you had certain strengths. You mentioned how your sister, was very methodical,
Yeah.
probably quality minded, right? Wanted
Mhm.
everything perfect, and you had a speed to things
Get
that
it.
you wanted to
Get it done.
get things moving,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Probably plays out a little bit, right? In the way things go in both your lives. I'm sure that if we asked if I asked you what does your sister do for a living now, it wouldn't be too far from the methodical nature of her personality, right?
Well, I will not comment on that.
Okay, okay.
I'll just say that she's retired now.
Retired. Okay, good. Okay,
Oh gosh, this is great though. Oh, and I had another question. It's gone from my mind. That's not good for the interviewer to forget the questions. Well, no. Well, then I'll proceed with another one.
sure.
What I loved about your description of the storming, walking through all that, the storming, norming, etc., is my next question was: if you are a young person, you're just starting out, you just graduated college or high school or whatever, and you're now in your first position, what are some things that you would advise them?
So, do you want me to bring my son down because he fits that bill exactly? So, graduated college last year, working on his second job, and I've had to give him some lots of heart-to-heart conversations. But um, so they talk about the different personality types in the generations, and it definitely does exist to some extent. Um, I'm from the generation of the no seatbelts, um, you know, helmets, and I drove my 10 speed on a 2-lane highway with no shoulder, 4 miles each way in the dark with no lights. Um, it was how we grew up. It wasn't the safest, but it was a little bit more carefree, and you took risks calculated risks, but you had to fend for yourself. It
Yeah.
wasn't cell phones. You didn't get to call
That's right.
mom and dad to come pick you up.
Yeah.
Very different environment, right? So I explained to my son, who has all the technology, who has everything at his fingertips, that he cannot think that he's going to come out of college, where he did get a internship before he graduated with my previous company, that was very gracious to give him a project coordinator role, and then hired him full time when he graduated at a very good salary. And then, of course, Doge hit, and they had a downsizing, and he lost his job, and then he had to find another job, which he just recently has.
Good.
And that job was a little less, and he was beside himself. Like, how can this be? I should not be going backwards in salary. I should be only going forward. So my advice is, you have to take steps back sometimes.
Yes.
You have to always reassess who you are, what your skill sets are, what direction you want to go in. And I'm going to give you a personal experience. So I was a director of operations, director of product, director of this, director of that. And again, director positions, great, wonderful. Don't mean the hill of beans unless you're happy and you're doing a good job, right? I worked for some what I call startup companies that sold off later on, and I did this for about 4 years, and I worked my tail off. A lot of hours, a lot of missed time with the kids. A lot of quality time lost in my life to build my so-called career. I had been let go from this company that they brought me on under false pretenses. They told me they needed me to redo their entire product group. The woman that had my position was pregnant. She was going out on maternity leave. And they told me I was taking her position and the director role, and I was going to run the whole shop. When she was done with maternity leave, she came back, and there I went. So I was just a placeholder. So made me reassess. And I decided I'm going to take a step back. And that's how I got into project management. I went, called up a few friends of mine that I knew at Arbitron, and said, looking for a job. And they brought me on as a project manager. So it was a step back, but I needed to take a step back from salary and title and responsibility to reassess who I am and what I want to be. And I bring this up because it's important that the younger generations and people that are starting off recognize
Yeah,
it's not linear.
that's
It's
right.
you go up and down in your career, and
Yeah.
that's
You know,
okay. It's healthy,
this
right?
is amazing. This reminds me of another guest that I had, Eric Wentworth. He was talking about getting jobs. He's a recruiter.
Okay.
And one of the things that he said was, if you have to take a break, a career break, in the case of women, very often you will take a year to get the child,
Right.
uh, he said, or it may just be you can't find a job, whatever. He said, do something like volunteer work, because then you can point to doing something productive in that period, so that when you go looking for another job and they say, well, what about that gap? Well, you can say, this is what I did in that gap. And what I'm hearing you say is, sometimes that gap in your career is a step back in order to be able to step back onto the career.
Yeah. Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
For me, it was a great reset.
Yeah.
Had a few years at it was Maximum Healthcare, and it was still a challenging job, and I learned so much in project management.
Yeah.
And that was really what kind of elevated me to a different pathway. But it was really at that point in my career that it made me realize and take new stock of who I am,
Yeah.
what I bring as value, and getting back to, and I mentioned to you earlier, I put my pant leg on one leg at a time. I started believing I was better than who I am. I started drinking the juice.
Yeah.
I'm a director. People report to me. I'm important.
Yeah.
Hogwash.
Oh
I
gosh.
lost track. I lost track of what's important.
Yeah.
The people you work with,
Yeah.
the vision, the mission, being satisfied that you are helping others to achieve, so you all achieve. Again, going back to the team dynamic.
Yeah.
You can score 20 goals in a game, but if you lose 21-20, it's all for naught, right? Great stats, poor result. And I started believing that I was that big goal scorer, but we weren't winning any games. And that's what really, for me, taking that step back allowed me to move forward and recognize I need to reassess who I am and who I want to be, both as manager and especially as a leader.
Yeah. In resilience, confidence is one of the key things that allows you to know you can move forward. And I love this admonition to not avoid the stepping back if that's what you have to do. It should not diminish your confidence. You've actively chosen it. So take that as the validation of your confidence. Excellent.
Yeah, and I will say, and everyone talked about having a support structure, right? I don't think there's a management class that's out there that doesn't talk about having the support around you, whether it's friends, colleagues, spouse, kids. So for me, my spouse, who was a executive recruiter, funny enough, was home with the kids when they were younger. I'd gone back to work part-time. And when I hit this crossroad and I came home, completely and utterly deflated at this point.
Yeah.
I said, honey, it's time for you to take a little bit of a break. Take that step back. I'll take the step forward. I will step up for you. Again, the little Johnny Jesus scenario, right?
Yeah.
I was a little slower. She was faster. She'd said, I got your back. I'll take care of this. And she did. So she went back full time as a recruiter. I took a step back as a project manager and reset. And here we are now, years later, best move ever. That could have been the deciding point, not only for my career, but maybe my relationship
as well.
So don't ever underestimate, as the value of that support structure, especially, family.
Especially. Well, what it reminds me of is that excuse me, at that moment, you did a leader's job of making the decision and the choices. You looked at the really big picture.
I'd like to say I did. I probably was my wife who took the view of that one, but
that's okay. That's okay. You accepted it.
I don't ever pretend to be smarter than her. She's a smart cookie.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Listen, James, I knew this would be a fun conversation, and it really has been. And I want to thank you so much for just being willing to engage in this, what I think is the most fascinating subject, and do it from your experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you so much for having me. And great to learn a little bit about you also. I will not take away that you are one of the fastest corn shuckers on the West Coast.
Thank you, James.
And thank you. I really do appreciate the time with you today.
Good. Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself. Today, I'm going to talk about, from this book, The Tao of Leadership, Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, adapted for a new age by John Hyder. He writes in it on one of his chapters, when I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. When I let go of what I have, I receive what I need. When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. When I let go of what I have, I receive what I need. This is how the chapter on the paradox of letting go begins. And does that ever remind me of James' example of stepping back? Lao Tzu describes the feminine or yin paradoxes as, by yielding, I endure. The empty space is filled. When I give myself, I become more. When I feel destroyed, I am about to grow. When I desire nothing, a great deal comes to me. Now, before I comment further, it's important to remember that the Tao, the word, means how. I have read only sections of the Tao and only translated quotations from Lao Tzu. So when I read this opening section of the chapter, I was deeply moved. I began to recall the strategies, the hows, that I have used when leading a team. For example, on one team where we had to achieve some major complex issues for a client, I knew I had to have the team at 120%. So I asked each person to say what personal goal they wished to achieve as the team worked to achieve the goals of the project. We made a list of them, and each member committed to support the achievement of the personal goals of each other. Now, yes, we agreed that we would achieve the project goal, and we did, but while helping each other achieve personal goals as well. Now, I tell you that not one of the personal goals was actually in conflict with the overall goal. It rarely is, by the way. For example, one person wanted to learn about the organizational factors involved in the project to support a paper she was writing on a similar topic. No problem. Another wanted to refine their writing skills. Well, no problem with that. And on it went. And in the end, this project team achieved every objective of the project to the client's full satisfaction, while also meeting the timetable. And each person reported that they achieved their personal goals as well. Was I just sitting back? As the leader in each case, my job began with being clear about the goal that the client had asked us to achieve. My second job was to help them explore together how they wanted to work together. Then I got out of the way and let the members set the standards. Getting out of the way meant that I facilitated the discussions so they remained on track, and they allowed everyone to have their say and assure that all was clear, but I did not insert my ideas on the how. At the end, what I learned is that when staff define their own standards of excellence, they motivate themselves. I assured they had access to information and resources they needed, and that the objectives were being accomplished and when, but how they worked together was up to them. How each individual managed themselves was up to them. By yielding, I endured, exactly as Lao Tzu said. The final sentence of this chapter said, "This is the wisdom of the feminine. Let go in order to achieve. The wise leader demonstrates this." One final point about the Tao. Masculine and feminine refer to the direction of the action. The masculine, or yang, is force that goes forward. The feminine, or yin, is the force that recedes. Now, those forces that go forward are things like stating issues, needs, concerns. For the yin, when the force is receding, it's about listening to the issues, the needs, and the concerns. Neither is superior to the other. Both are necessary to achieve. You can't know the issues unless they are expressed. And you can't know the issues unless you received the words of expression. Heider goes on to say, knowing how polarities work, the wise leader does not push to make things happen, but allows process to unfold on its own. The Tao of Leadership by John Heider. I want to thank you for joining me today, and I hope you've enjoyed the conversation and learned something new. I know I did. I love interacting with you and hearing what you're thinking about and you're concerned with. Send me an email, Send it to Madelyn at madelynblair.com. I will read them. Or you can get on my mailing list by registering on the contact page of my website, madelynblair.com. I never share my mailing list with anyone, and I send out no more than one email a week. And if you're on YouTube, click the like button. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe. This helps me, of course, but it also helps others who are looking for similar information. I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilient leader.